Hello, it's Keith here, and this is lesson 3 of the ChibiTracks series of my 68000 assembly programming tutorials. We're looking at the ChibiTracks player again. Now this is my multi-platform music player. It's able to play the same binary music songs on the 8000, 6502 and Z80 systems, and I might port it to some others as well, and it supports basically every system within my tutorials on those systems because I've written a platform-specific sound driver called Chibi Sound Pro. There's a separate tutorial on that bridges the gap between the player and the actual underlying hardware. What we're going to look at today is the player that runs on all of the systems within a CPU. We're going to be looking at the part that handles the scripts that make up the patterns, that's the sequence of events within the song, and also the instrument, which is the events that happen when an instrument plays. And it's actually the same code that does both. While there are separate sections in the files for patterns and instruments, it's the same script processor that handles both. And so in theory, if you coded a file to do it, anything that a pattern can do, an instrument can do, and vice versa, although in some cases that might cause undesirable effects because having a pattern end in the middle of an instrument would be rather odd indeed. Anyway, let's go over to our code and let's take a look at what we're going to be looking at today. So we're looking at the multi-platform ChibiTracks file today, and we're going to be looking at it from, where is it? I'm not prepared very well here. We're going to be looking at it from the ChibiTracks play section here. Now this handles the updating of events, firstly for the pattern, that's the events within the song, and then for the channels themselves, which may currently be playing instruments that need updates. So those are the two separate things that this sequence will do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do these for each of the channels, and so we're loading A4 with the pointer to the channel data, and then we are loading the number of channels into D1 here. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So first of all, what we're going to do is we are going to decrease the current pattern time by 1. Now when this reaches 0, the current line of the pattern needs to be updated. Until then, it's just a pause on the previous line. So if this is not 0, then we're just going to skip. Otherwise, we're going to run the read pattern routine, and we'll see that in just a moment. Now, once we've handled any required pattern reading, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the instrument. So what we're doing here is we are looking at the instrument time. Now, the instrument time is slightly different because this can actually be 0. If it is 0, then there is no current playing instrument on the channel. So the channel is just finished playing an instrument. It's not been asked to do anything else. However, if it's not 0, then we're going to decrease it. And if it's reached 0, then we are going to update the current instrument, because the instrument will have a sequence of commands, like maybe a drum will have turn the noise on the first line, and then it will start to decrease the pitch, and then at the end it might decrease the volume, and then it might stop. And so until it gets to that stop, which would be the last line with a delay of 0, we need to keep making changes. And so in that case, we need to do the update channel to process any changes to the instrument, and as part of that, any changes to the channel settings themselves and the sound that channel should be playing. Once we've updated a channel, we then move to the next channel by adding the length of the data block, which is 32 bytes at the moment on this system, to A4. And then we decrease D1 and repeat until we've done all the channels. And at the moment, this tracker is currently only been tested for 3 channels, although the ChibiTracker Pro Windows software can do more than that. It's experimental though, so you're going to have to fix that yourself if you want to do 8 channels or something. Anyway, so that's what we're doing there. We repeat until we updated everything. And then what we're doing is we're running a routine potentially called Chibi Sound Pro Update. Now, actually on all of the 68,000 systems as it stands, I think this doesn't do anything. But this is designed for systems like the beeper speaker systems like the ZX Spectrum, where the processor actually has to make some volitional action to actually play a sound. So on that system, we have to manually create the waveform using the CPU. And so to make a song continuously play, we have to continuously use the CPU. And so on those systems, this update will actually make the sound, but on systems that don't require that, which is almost all of them, that will simply point to a return command just for compatibility, so that would just cause a return. Now let's take a look at the read pattern function. So basically all we're going to do is we are going to load in the address of the pattern. This is a 32-bit pointer within the data block of the current channel. So we're loading that into A3. We are then moving a single byte from A3, and this is going to basically point to a length of time, a delay. Now if we look at a song here, this is a song. So here is a pattern, and each line starts with a number here. These are all 2. Now that is the delay, that's the number of ticks that this line needs to occur for, and then after that delay has reached 0, we would move to the next line. Now all of those are 2, but you will see that last line is a 1, And you see here there's a 10, and so that's basically a gap in the pattern with nothing to do in it. So there's probably 5 lines there with nothing to do, or maybe 10 lines, just depending on, I think it'll be 10 in this case. So there's 10 lines with no events on them, so rather than have data with nothing in it, we just have a pause of 10 there. You can see then we've got a sequence of bytes, which are commands, and each line ends with a 00, which is actually the end of line command there. You will also see in the instruments there's a 0 at the very end. That is a delay of 0, so that's different from that 00. I've just represented them differently. The commands are all represented in hex. The delays are all represented as decimal, just so that you can clearly see which is which. So that's what we're basically reading in here. And so here we are loading in that delay. We're running the speed function. That's multiplying that by the current playing speed, because a number 2 or a number 10 in our pattern actually isn't the playback speed. A playback speed of 5 means that that needs to be multiplied by 5, so that 2 would become a 10, or that 10 will become a 50, and that's the actual delay in interrupts that the song needs to wait. So that's what we're doing there. We're then updating the pattern time here. That's going to tell it when the current line is now old and we need to update again. And then we're running process sound commands, and this is the common routine for both instruments and patterns. We're then updating the new pattern address, loading the new 32-bit value from A3 after we processed the old one into pattern L. Pattern L is the first byte of the pattern address there. So that's how we read a pattern. Now, the update channel routine is somewhat similar. This is where we need to update the instrument. So what we're doing here is we're loading the address of the instrument into A3. We're loading a byte. This is the delay from A3 into D0, and we're seeing if that is a 0. Now, if it is a 0, we've reached the end of the instrument. You see here, this instrument's got a delay of 4 on that first line, a delay of 1 on the next line, which basically means that line would only play for a single tick. A delay of 0 isn't logical. It doesn't make any sense, because that would mean the line had ended before it had played, and what it actually means is it's the end of a sequence. Now, instruments end with a 0. Patterns in theory could end with a 0, but actually they always end with a command 10, which is a new pattern command. So there's never a 0 there. It wouldn't matter if you put one, but there's never a logical reason for a pattern to have one. See, that's why there aren't any there. So what we're doing here is we're seeing if we need to stop the instrument. If we do need to stop the instrument, we're just setting D3 to 0, which is the volume to 0 basically. We'll see that in a moment. Now, if the value we read in wasn't 0, that is actually the next time for the this line to process. So we're storing that here, and we are then moving along 1 byte, and we're going to process the commands on the rest of that line. So basically, we've read in the that's a pattern, sorry, we're looking at instruments. So we've read in the delay there, the delay 4, and now we've got all these bytes here that we need to process, and that's what we're going to look at right now. So we're going to see that in a moment, and what we then need to do is we now need to actually update the instrument address for the next time. That's pointing to the next line of the instrument, and then what we're going to do is we're going to actually update the sound that's currently playing, because the instrument presumably has changed the sound that's being played. Otherwise, what's it doing really would be the question. So we're loading in the note number, we're loading in the pitch offset here. Those are going into D2 and D0. We're running a routine called tween tone, and this will take the note number and the offset, which is a note offset and also a shift between notes, and we'll see that next time. That's calculating the actual note, the DE value that we need to pass to the Chibi Sound Pro driver, which that value is platform specific, and it uses a lookup table to calculate the note correct values there. We're loading in our volume into D3 here. We're loading our channel number and also our noise state into D6. Our noise state would be very odd indeed. I don't think we're doing that. It's our noise state we're loading in. And then we are jumping here and we're setting Chibi Sound Pro, which is the platform specific driver. I've got tutorials on that. And that is setting the actual attributes of the sound hardware. It works completely differently on every system. The idea of it is that it takes a channel number in D6, a volume in D3, and it takes a frequency in D2, I think it is. Yeah, D2 here. So that's what it does, and that is playing an instrument. And if the instrument is silenced, we're just setting D3 to 0 and jumping straight into here to silence the instrument, and that will turn the sound off. That's what happens at the end of the instrument. Okay, So the rest of the work is being done by process sound commands. Now what this does is it will take the scripts, basically these hexadecimal codes here, and these are doing things like changing the note number, changing the volume, changing the pitch, and things like that. And this is what actually creates our song, but both in the form of deciding when to play instruments and what those instruments actually do. You know, an instrument might make the volume go up and down to create a wavy effect, but the pattern may make the volume come down as well to do a fade out. So that's why the same code does both jobs. So what we're doing here is we're loading in a byte from the script here, and we're loading it into D0, and we're checking if that is a 0. Now, if it's a 0, then we've reached the end of the line, because remember, each of these lines ends in a 0. So 0 means we've reached the end of the line of the script, as well as the end of an instrument script itself. So that's what we're doing here. Now, if we've done that, we're just going to jump down to here and return. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we are going to back up D0 into D1, and that's because we're going to need this later. Now, there's two kinds of commands. There's commands that are a single byte, and in that case, the top nibble is the command number and the bottom nibble is the parameter. And then there's commands that are 2 bytes, and in those cases, the top nibble is a 0, the bottom byte is the command number, and then there's a following byte, which is the parameter. And so this is an efficiency thing. Some parameters only need 4 bits, some need a full byte, but we want to make things as small as possible where we don't need a full byte. So that's what we've got here. So what we're doing here is we're taking the top nibble of D0 and we're going to compare that to our various options here and branch out to the various 1 nibble command options. If the top nibble is 0, it's a multi-byte command though, and we've got a separate routine to do that. So what options do we have for our 1 nibble commands? Well, we have a pitch shift option here. And so what we can do is we can pitch down and pitch up. And so what we're doing is taking the bottom nibble. In this case, we're converting it to a negative number. So we're taking the 4 bits and making them negative. And we're basically setting that as the new pitch. Pitch up is basically the same, positive, adding that as the new pitch. So that's doing a 4-bit pitch shift. We have a 4-bit volume here. So basically what we're doing here is we're taking the 4 bits and we are adding that or subtracting that to the current volume. So we're treating that as a signed 4-bit number here, and we're adding it to the current volume here, and that's what's going on there. Now, in the case that we have gone over the value 255, we're locking to 255, and if in the case of the value where we're going down, we're checking if we've gone below 0, and we're locking to 0. So you don't need to worry about what the volume previously was. If you keep making the volume louder and louder, it's not going to wrap around back to 0, because that'd be very strange indeed. Okay, so those are the volume options. The most important of the 1 nibble commands is actually the noise command. Now, the noise state is just an on or an off, and this creates a distortion effect and is handy for simple drum sounds. Now, this basically takes a single nibble value, but actually, as it currently stands in the code, that is only going to be a 1 or a 0. Now, this C1 is a noise on, and this C0 is a noise off, and that's the only values that 2 and 3 currently don't make any sense. I say currently because, you know, maybe one day I'll improve this code and add new functionality, and that would be, you know, some spare functionality that I could add and without using up any of the bytes. So that's what we've got here. And so what we're doing here is we're taking the channel number byte, because the top bit of that channel number byte is actually the noise state. So the channel number can only be 0 to 127. The top bit is the noise state. So we're keeping the bottom bits there. We're shifting the bottom bit of our parameter to the top bit, and we're ORing that back in, keeping the channel number and just changing the noise state. So that's dealing with the noise there. So those are our 1 nibble commands. There aren't very many of them, and there's quite a lot spare. Now, the whole thing of this ChibiTracks software is a very simple music software. It's not very good, in all honesty. It was designed to be simple so I could port it to new systems. It's also designed to be simple because if I have a crazy idea one day and I want to add weird and wonderful functionality, well, it's there for you to do that, and it's there for you to do that. So if you want to improve this software and add new and weird functionality of your own, there's loads of spare commands here that you can use. So you could add those commands here. And you know, you can modify the tracks either in the either as raw assembly files. These are the files ChibiTracks Pro, the Windows application, actually produces. The application is a C# application. It's free, so you're welcome to upgrade that as well if you wish. So as I say, it's all free for you to use, and as I always say, you're welcome to use any of my code in your own project, even if they're commercial. So you know, you're welcome to make whatever you can of it, if you can make anything of it. That's what I always say. Okay, anyway, so those are the single byte commands. The multi-byte commands, kind of similar. So what we're going to do here is we're going to load a single byte from A3, loading another byte in because the parameter is always the following byte, because these are the multi-byte commands. We're loading that to D4, and then we're going to check D1 because we backed up D1 before, and at that point we kept the original value before we did the filter there. So we've got D1, and so now we're going to compare this to the multi-byte commands, the pitch, volume, note, and loop and play instrument, and that's really all we've got here. So these are generally pretty straightforward, to be honest. So the note command is just telling the system to change the note that the Chibi Sound Pro is playing. So we're just loading that byte value in as the new note. Volume is just loading the byte value in as the new volume. Nothing clever here. Pitch is just loading that byte value in as the new pitch. It's the tweener that combines the pitch and the note and works out the 16-bit value that Chibi Sound Pro is actually going to play. So all of the clever work's being done by that. We'll see that next time. Now loop is a little bit more tricky. This is used for making instruments that play forever. So if you want to have a wavy sound effect, you would basically change the pitch, and you would have a loop at the end of the instrument that would jump back to the start, and then that can play forever. If you do that and you want to stop it, there's no key up function within ChibiTracks or Chibi Sound Pro. What you want is a silent instrument, an instrument that just ends, and you would play that silent instrument to stop the wavy instrument. That's what I've done in the past. It's crude, but it works, and as I say, this is a very simple player. So the loop is just a byte offset to the current address of the line in the script. So what you want to do is you want to calculate, for example, if we had our loop command here, you would probably want to jump back to this position here or something. You want to jump back to a valid command within your script, and then the instrument will play forever. If you jump back to the wrong address and the code is processing something that doesn't make any sense, then it's not going to work very well. So that's what the loop is for. Play instrument, this will instigate a new instrument being played. So we'll see those here. Now play instrument will actually instigate an instrument being played, and so what we're doing here is we are loading the address of our instrument. We're basically multiplying the instrument number by 2. We're loading in the song base, and we're calculating the address to the instrument table. Now the instrument table, if I look at the right file, is basically a list of 16-bit values here. The addresses are all in Little Endian. This is a Z80, originates from the Z80, so the 68,000 is having to work like a Z80 here. So these are offsets in Little Endian within the file to the instruments themselves. And so what we're going to do is we are going to load in the instrument we want here. We're loading in the 16-bit address of the instrument table here, adding the offset so that we've got a full address to the actual position in the song. We're then adding the offset to the instrument we want to play. We're loading the address of the instrument script here, adding the offset. You can see we're doing this in 2 parts because it's Little Endian. And then what we're doing is we are loading the instrument time as 1. Now this means that as soon as that instrument is processed next time, it will reach 0, and that will force the script to be processed. So a value of 1 is forcing an instant update basically. And then we're loading the address of the script into instrument L, which is the address of the instrument. And then we are jumping and processing sound commands again. Now process sound commands will just carry on with our script. Now I did remember there's one actually I missed. The one nibble command 10 actually doesn't have an extra parameter. That is the pattern end, and all that does is it jumps back up to here and it continues in the next entry within the sequence, and that is the end of each of our patterns. And so if you look at any of the patterns here, you will see they always end in 10. Now actually that 00, I'm not sure you need that. I think that may never actually get processed, but basically that 10 there is a pattern end, and that will cause the next pattern in the sequence to be loaded in and processed as part of the script. So there we go. So that is the end of the code that we're going to be looking at today. Now next time we're going to look into the tweener, and that's got some, I think, quite neat mathematical code for doing fractions, and so we're going to see that next time. I was quite pleased with that code. Nothing amazing, I'm sure, but it was good for my usual standards, shall we say. Maybe that's something to be ashamed of, but never mind. Anyway, if you like what you've seen, please like and subscribe. If you want to see more work done on the sound stuff in general, please consider backing me on Patreon. I wrote this music software because I was planning to do music multi-platform games, and I needed multi-platform music, but I don't have time anymore to do multi-platform games, and so I'm only going to continue developing it if people back me to do so. And if that's a problem for you, if you don't have the money to back me, that's completely fine, because as I say, it's all open source. And so if you don't have the money but you do have the time, make it better and put it on GitHub or whatever you want. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.